You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Hey everyone, it is Monday morning. That means we've got McGuire Mondays here talking all things Toronto Maple Leafs. Pierre, it is wonderful to see you. I hope you had a great weekend. I know you're in Boston for the Beanpot. Very exciting. We know you watch hockey literally 24 hours a day is what I pretty much have come to the conclusion on. And in multiple different cities and countries. So let's take things back to Toronto and actually let's take things to, let's debrief Edmonton. The Toronto Maple Leafs taking on Edmonton. They actually won this game. Bit of a surprise, 4-3. Joseph Woll, 45 saves. How surprised are you that he was able to have a performance like that?
I'm not surprised because I think he's been trending the right way. I know some people have been questioning him in terms of consistency, but the truth of the matter is the team hasn't been as good because of the injuries that they've been faced with. Obviously, no John Tavares, no Matthew Nyes. They just lost Oliver Ekman-Larsson the other night after a pretty short stay on the ice in Edmonton. So they've been dealing with some injury situations, Julie. Quite frankly, I'm not surprised by Joseph. I think he's one of those guys that's calm, cool, and collected. I think he'll continue to get better, especially once Stolarz comes back and pushes him. I think Toronto's goaltending is not going to be an issue for them. I really don't. The thing that impressed me the most about Toronto and Edmonton, that's a real good Edmonton team. I know they had a tough start, but that's a really good Edmonton team. And for them to go in there and win the game the way they did, I thought their start was really good. I was really impressed by a lot of guys. Matthew Nyes was tremendous. Marner was tremendous. Having Tavares back makes a big difference, as you know. So I was really impressed by a lot of what Toronto did in that game.
I'm going to go back to one statement you just said right there where I'm not worried about Toronto's goaltending situation. How surprised would you be to look back a year ago and say, I said that? That they figured out their goaltending situation for the first time in a long time?
I think that Brad Treliving and the management team deserve a lot of credit on the Stolarz signing. I know we talked about that at the beginning of the year. I thought it was one of the better heists of the summer, and it's turning out to be that way. Joseph Woll's been, I think, really dealt with internally really well. I think his play is speaking to that. Having Matt Murray there is never a bad backup plan. And Dennis Hildeby's not exactly a terrible goalie either. So they've got depth at that position, something they probably haven't had in a very long time.
Right. Depth at goaltending, check. And that's what will help you down the stretch and in playoffs. As we know, it's really kind of goaltenders that go on a heater seem to be part of teams, championship teams. That's what you need. But you mentioned the fact that John Tavares and Matthew Nyes came back. They had been both out for various different reasons, and also feels as though someone comes back and then someone's out. And they've never really had this. They've never had their full lineup this entire season. When you see two guys, I think you could, and correct me if I'm wrong, when Tavares and Nyes were out, they struggled. So when you have two of your top six guys out, the consensus is that you're not good enough. If you are the Leafs and you know that, what would you be thinking right now?
That we need to add at the deadline. Very fair question and a good question. I think they still have an organizational need on defense, preferably for a puck-moving defenseman, not a defender, but a puck-moving defenseman, a guy that could potentially help run their power play. And they clearly have a need for another forward, preferably a third center. I was talking to an NHL coach the other day, and we were going over the Leafs lineup. And I said to the coach, with total confidence, I said, you look at it, Matthews in the one hole, Tavares in the two hole. I don't think David Kampf is a number 3, Julie. And he said, no, he's not. He's a 4. But if you can find a 3 and move Domi to the wing, then you got a lineup. Kampf is a really good 4. You got to find that 3, the guy that fits in the 3 hole really well. And if they can do that, they got to have a legitimate chance to win the cup. Between getting a third center, moving Domi to the wing, and then obviously finding another defenseman, Julie, this team could be for real. It really could.
I mean, when you say all those things together, I think Leafs fans would be licking their chops because that really is just pinpointing so many of the issues that could be solved in that one situation. And I did talk to a source. I love saying that because, I'm not an insider, although I did want to be one once, and I'm glad I didn't go down that route. As Adam Schefter told me, this is not a life you want to live, trust me. And so he's just like, you're on all the time. Like, I commend the TSN insiders, the Elliot Friedmans of the world. You don't sleep ever. But someone told me that they kind of want to do something like, if they're going to take their shot, they're going to take it. It has to be like take their shot in terms of a trade or in terms of acquiring someone. It has to be the right thing, and kind of like do it at once with what's going on. I have heard, it's been out there that they were looking at Scott Laughton, but I don't think that necessarily that would address the things that you're talking about. What do you think about Scott Laughton potentially being a target?
I actually think he's a really good third-line player. I think right now he's playing as a 2 and sometimes a 1, but I think in a perfect world, Scott's a very good penalty killer. He's a good face-off man. He can't play the wing. He plays with a lot of intestinal fortitude, which I really like, especially when it comes to playoff hockey. Obviously, he hasn't played in a lot of playoff hockey just because he's been part of a Philadelphia Flyer rebuild that seemingly has been going on forever and ever and ever. But I do think he wouldn't be a bad fit. Plus, he's an Ontario guy, and I don't mind that. I kind of like it when guys come back. The perfect example is, and I know people are going to say that's a long time ago, Dougie Gilmour. When Dougie Gilmour,
that was a long time ago, yeah. But
yeah, it was a long time. But I'm just telling you, he made a massive difference. You go look at those. I was coaching in the league then. When they got him in Toronto, we're like, this whole team's going to change, and it did. Dougie changed the way the team played. And the way Pat Burns coached and the way, Cliff Fletcher managed, it just changed the team. And that was probably the last time you could say, we really think the Leafs have a legitimate chance to win the Cup. Really, you could say that.
Yeah, that would be.
And had it not been for Wayne Gretzky and some unbelievable athleticism, seriously, Toronto could beat LA. And
darn that Wayne Gretzky, the best player in the world happens to just get in the way. It's like, thanks at that time, right? Like, yeah, Toronto could have. Yeah. Right, as you mentioned, they were on the cusp there to being able to make it to the Stanley Cup final, and having Killer on their team and a guy like that was what a time to be a Leafs fan. I empathize with everyone who's been a Leafs fan since basically like 06 to, not now because the last couple of years have been good, but 06 to 2013 was like the dark ages, the dark era of the Leafs for a while. Okay, so yeah, I know, because I took my mom to the Leafs' first playoff game in 2013 that they had played in 9 years, and that cost me so much money, which she doesn't know. She thinks I got the tickets for free, which I lied to her. And they lost to the Bruins, of course. All right, moving on. Looking at okay, so but when you're looking at trading them or going for a trade, how much do you think the fact that they have limited cap space and they don't have a first round pick will affect that?
They have prospects, though, and maybe this is a year where you don't want a first round pick unless you're picking in the top 7, which Toronto won't be. You may want to think about next year. They do have prospects. I'm not going to mention names because I don't think it's fair to those kids. But they do have prospects that a lot of people would have interest in. They also have guys playing in the American Hockey League that some teams might have interest in as well, younger players. So that's an interesting part of this whole dynamic. I don't think the cap space is going to be an issue for them, and I'll tell you why. I think the longer you go towards a deadline, the easier it becomes to digest some of that cap space. And they may even actually in a deal have to move a player, an established NHL player with a contract. So that would open up some space too for them.
Do you think they'd want to move some of their prospects?
They might. I think they see the grass has never been greener. The light's never been greener. This is an amazing opportunity for them. And you only get one shot at it. When you think about it, you got to deal with the Marner contract going forward. Austin Matthews isn't getting any younger. You start doing the math on all this stuff. When you got chance, and it sure looks like the light is pretty green right now for Toronto in the East anyways, you may want to load up and go. I'm not saying the window's closing because I don't think it is. I really don't. I think they got a
but it's peak. It's
runway.
Like kind of at its peak. Like it's in a very good moment. Like not necessarily it's peaking, but it's riding the gondola up Sulphur Mountain right now, and it's almost at the top.
That's right. No, so what I look at, Julio, is Like Tanev's not getting any younger. McCabe's not getting any younger. Riley's not getting any younger. Those are really important components on their back end. Those guys, Oliver Ekman-Larsson not getting any younger. So, like, they don't have a lot of depth on defense filtering through their organization like they have right now with their established players. So that's another thing that I'm sure they're thinking about as well going forward.
Right. And then if you add someone who's in that bottom six, but in that third line center sort of area on the third line, then you're helping with the depth and hopefully igniting that. We mentioned after we had watched the game against the Wild, there was a lot of talk ahead of time just about the fact their depth scoring was really almost non-existent in terms of guys being able to generate consistently. And it really has been so much up to, I mean, a Nylander, or Nylander gets like everyone going. I think he's like such an underratedly cool player. He can play really well, but he's also just this like quiet, cool presence on the ice, which I don't really know what that would mean in terms of analysis, Pierre, but he just seems to exude a lot of, I don't know, like a quiet, calm confidence. Like if you were a coach, like how would you describe a guy like that?
Oh, I think composed, somebody that I could count on in a big moment. I know he gets a ton of breakaways, and I know that's caused celeb right now where he doesn't score enough on breakaways. But the truth of the matter is he's an unbelievable game breaker. They're so blessed. If you look at their two top right wingers in Toronto, between Nylander and Marner, it's just crazy. The game-breaking capability of just those two players alone and the skill level, they're matchup problems for every team in the league. And so, no, I'm a big fan of both players. I just think they're both outstanding players. I had the privilege of coaching Willie's father when Willie's father was 19 and 20 years old.
Wow.
And we had a good relationship, Michael. We had a good relationship, but I was really hard on him. Michael had unbelievable puck protection skills, but he didn't have nearly the scoring ability that Willie has. Not even close.
Right. It feels as though everyone knows because it's been just brought out so much and because he's been doing it a lot. And, you know, I see athletic articles in my inbox that are like breakaway specialists like William Nylander. Everyone has that on their radar right now. So him streaking, you know, into the zone and those stretch passes aren't as frequent, I think, because it's on people's mind. But I want to ask you first before we move on to some other stuff. But we talk about Mitch Marner. Any idea or sense of what might be sort of the future with a contract with him?
Well, I think now because of what the league has just put out, along with the NHL Players Association, Julie, what they've just put out in terms of where the cap's going long term, I don't think a contract's going to be a problem with Mitchell Marner. They're going to have plenty of cap room long term. I mean, he doesn't have to worry about this year; it's down the road. So I don't see that being an issue. I'm mesmerized by how they come up with these financial numbers for cap growth, but I guess they found a way to do it. So
yeah.
I think congratulations to the league and to Commissioner Bettman and to the Players Association. But I find it really interesting that when most people are having a tough time growing businesses, the NHL seemingly is having no problem growing their business at all.
Right. And do you mind telling everyone, because you can explain it better than me, but what sort of what you're discussing with the cap space growing?
Well, I think they're looking long-term at TV revenues. I think they're looking long-term at the potential for different growth elements to the hockey business, you know, whether it's, shirts, sweaters, memorabilia, different advertising opportunities. I mean, there's just so many things to it. Long term, I don't know how the TV numbers are going to sustain themselves the way they are right now because they're not really super elite, especially south of the border. It's something they're going to have to talk about. But look at Gary Bettman. I can tell you this right now because I know the numbers. When Gary Bettman came into the league, I was working in the league. The business was a $500 million a year business. That's what it was. It was $500 million. And here we are 33 years later, 34 years later with Commissioner Bettman as a commissioner. It's $6.2 billion. Like that's not even close.
Wow,
what he's done. I mean, he's just changed, whether it's franchise values, expansion, growth of TV markets, growth of regional TV packages, just everything, commercialization of the game, taking it overseas. There's so much that he's done to grow the game. He deserves a lot of credit for that. And the thing in Canada that nobody wants to talk about, when it was dire, they couldn't find a Canadian entity to want to buy the Montreal Canadiens. It was dire. He found people to come in and buy the team. And the Gillette family came in, and they were amazing stakeholders of the Montreal Canadiens until the Molson family took it over. And the Molson family have done an amazing job with the Canadiens. But I'm just using that as an example. Gary's done a really good job with trying to look after the Canadian marketplaces because of the Canadian currency being where it is. I think he's done a magnificent job with that, and he doesn't get nearly enough credit for that.
Right. I mean, people will always criticize Gary Bettman regardless, which I pray for his mental health on that regard, just as a human being. When I look at Chris Johnson from The Athletic had posted, he works for everyone. Okay, so he'd said, some guys are like, I mean, they're everywhere, right? I just know them as like, they're on my phone, they're putting out stuff. Okay. So he said, this was on January 31st, so 3 days ago. I mean, the end of 5 weeks of January. The NHL and NHLPA are forecasting significant calorie bumps. I mean, we are going to be increasing calories during the winter, that's for certain. Bumps on the current 88 million ceiling in the coming years. It's a great time to be hitting free agency. So 2025-2026 is 95.5 million. 26-27, 104 million, and then 27-28, 113.5 million, which is really remarkable, the growth of like the cap there. So yeah, I guess as you mentioned, if you're hitting free agency or if you're up for a big payday, this is the time to shine. So hopefully Mitchell Marner gets that bag because he deserves it. And I hope he stays in Toronto for him and for the Leafs, because as we've talked about before, guys that want to play in Toronto, it adds so much more, because there's a lot of guys that don't want to play in Toronto or don't have that connection, or they don't want to handle everything that comes with playing in Toronto. It takes a special type of player, I would imagine. I can't even imagine. I did hear that Ryan O'Reilly does not want to come back to Toronto. And
well, that's significant. That's breaking news, because if in fact that's true, and I take you at your word, that's one of the pieces of the puzzle that's out for the Leafs, because he would have been the perfect fit for what we were talking about.
I heard, because I was just talking with a source who told me that Ryan O'Reilly did not want to come back. And you think, well, but he is from Ontario, he played there, and his connection with Craig Berube, but he doesn't want to come back. And there's various reasons why, which I'm not going to say. But if you don't want to be there, it's not really, you're not going to go, right? And you're not going to trade for a guy that doesn't want to be there. That's certainly for sure. Okay. Got to ask you, Pierre, what do you think about the fact that McDavid and Draisaitl, and I'm paraphrasing all this, but they basically were kind of making fun of the fact that moving their game based on the Leafs?
They're allowed. It's okay. I don't know. I let everything take place on the ice. I know this new generation likes to talk a lot, and they like to do a lot on the internet, and they like to do a lot on social media. I just think the games are played on the ice. Let them go be played on the ice, and let the best guys or best girls win. That's just how I look at it. So, yeah, I don't worry too much about that.
Well, guys are certainly saying more, which, I love in the media when they say something that's of interest, right? Because we just get vanilla all the time. We don't really get any kind of like hot sauce from a lot of the guys, unless, only like you remember the moments when they do say something ridiculous or interesting, because they're so few and far between. But I mean, do you think that do you think players feel the same way in a sense as like fans outside of Toronto, in that, like the Leafs and like Toronto feels like they are the center of the universe. They think they are. And so they kind of have a chip on their shoulder against them.
Oh, yeah, 100%. There's no question about that. That's been going on for a long time. It's not just Toronto. It was Montreal back in the day, too. And usually the saying was amongst the coaching fraternity, when you go into Montreal, especially into the Forum, you were already down a goal because the referees were going to make sure of that, So that's just how it was. But I think most of that is jealousy. I would tell you this. You were talking about how a lot of players don't want to play in Toronto. I haven't heard players actually say that. I've heard a lot of guys say how well they're treated when they play in Toronto. I just talked to Keith Pelly for a long time the other day, our good friend, you and I. And Keith was talking about how much pride he sees amongst the peer group in Toronto of guys that want to be part of this and are part of it, and how much he respects the process of being a Leaf. And he knows, and even players in the league would know this too. They're a really important franchise to the league because the better that they do, the more money flows through the game. And so, people can maybe be a little jealous of where they stand right now as a quote-unquote center of the hockey universe. Toronto's a really important franchise to the well-being of the National Hockey League. Really important.
Yes, that's a great point for you to bring up, because I think that, well, first of all, there is jealousy. I always say if anyone's ever criticizing you, it's like they're jealous. They're just jealous. They want to be in that situation. But I put up this TikTok a couple years ago when the Leafs were in the playoffs, because you just reminded me, because I went through all my TikToks when TikTok was ending for like 24 hours. And one was like a sound of, it was of Joe Biden saying like, it's good for the economy. Like it brings in money. And I paired it with like the Leafs winning and like the Leafs doing well. And like, because it's true. Like the Leafs being good and continuing on and being like a big thing and having attention is good for literally everyone. And especially as these Hockey Night in Canada rights are being negotiated at the moment, the better any Canadian team is, especially the Leafs, that price goes up for TV rights. And as we know, TV rights can fuel so much, as we've seen in the NBA and the NFL, all that kind of stuff. So it can change the entire league.
Well said. Totally agree. And we are in a very different time with TV. The league knows it. They don't want to talk about it. The TV networks know it. They don't want to talk about it. I mean, if you look at the sustained losses of what's gone on south of the border for the TV people, it's not easy. I really commend them. They're doing their very best to try to put on a quality product. The problem is that there's not a lot of revenue for them right now, and the ratings speak to that. So it's not easy. It's really, really difficult.
Yeah, and everyone's got so many different packages, right? It's like, do you have this or this, or you have YouTube TV? Are you streaming? Me personally, I like to just give my account number and routing number to Spectrum and just let them take whatever they want for, just the amount of. I'm like, are we seriously up to like $270 a month so I can watch just like, the amount, like just be able to watch the games you want to watch, right? And then you're adding, we always say it's like you're adding ESPN Plus, you're adding HBO Max. Well, I guess just Max now, Hulu, everything else. So Amazon, whatever. We can write it off. We're in the biz for it. So at least there's no tax, I think. Okay, let me get back to the good stuff. We got the Leafs playing Calgary tomorrow, and then they'll head on to face Seattle and Vancouver. What are you looking for in terms of Oliver Ekman-Larsson? We're not sure on the timeline of that, but it's day to day. But if it's, longer than that, they might hold him out till after Four Nations. But let's look at Calgary. What are like 2 or 3 things you're looking to see in that matchup?
Well, Calgary's really done a good job. They're one of only 2 teams in a playoff position right now that have a minus goal differential. Calgary's actually minus 11 on the West, and Detroit's minus 9 on the East. They're the only 2 teams in playoff positions right now that are minus goal differentials. But here's what I would tell you. They're both playing really well. Detroit's won 6 in a row. Calgary's done an amazing job. Ryan Huska, their coach. I know everybody's talking about all these different coaches as Coach of the Year. The job that Ryan Huska's done in Calgary is phenomenal. They don't give up a lot of odd man rushes. They play a 4-line attacking type game. They're on your defense real quick. They get bodies to the net. Rasmus Andersson's probably the best defenseman in the league that outside of the Calgary market nobody even knows exists. He's a tremendous, tremendous player. They've got a really good young player in Matthew Coronado, a kid that played at Harvard. He's an American kid from Long Island. They've got a lot of good stuff going on in Calgary. I give Craig Conroy and his staff a lot of credit. This will not be an easy out for Toronto going into Calgary. But what I like about the next 3 games, They're urgent games for all three teams, Calgary, Seattle, Vancouver. So Toronto knows they got to up the ante. And whenever Toronto's pushed like that, they usually respond, which I think is a good thing, not a bad thing, Julie. And then the final thing, just talking about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, if he can't play, I have to think Philippe Myers is going to come back into the lineup.
Right, yeah. And he's been a serviceable defenseman this year, playing quite well for them, bringing him in.
Yeah, and he's fitting up. Like, I'll tell you right now, he and Morgan Riley, when they play together, they fit in really well together. You know, Philippe can really skate. He's a big guy that can really move around the ice, and he's got a very big wingspan, so his stick positioning is usually really good, and he can create a lot of opportunities because of the turnovers. He creates a lot of turnovers. So I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But for me, if Toronto, going forward, the only thing I'd say about Toronto, they had the right position player as a depth player in the 3-hole at center, and they had one more offensive-minded defenseman. This team's got a legitimate chance to win the Cup. They really do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I believe you on that. It's, you know, we see how well they've done so far this season, despite not having their entire lineup healthy at most of the times, and having Austin Matthews, of course, dealing with issues, and they've still been able to keep their head afloat. And that's what we know is the more depth you have, the better goaltending you have. That's a game changer. And with 3 games left until Four Nations, and a couple of the players going to play, some of them will have a break, which will be good for them. And what I'm thinking about this is like, okay, you're a bit on the home stretch of this set of games. And I did a PWHL game yesterday, Montreal at New York, and talking with head coach Corey Chevry, she just said, you know, we've got one game that was yesterday. It was at the end of kind of a stretch. They'd played 3 games in 5 days, which was wild. And she just said, we're so excited for this game because, first of all, they hadn't beaten New York yet. That was their last team left to beat. But she was like, it's a chance for us to put an exclamation point on just this stretch and almost like solidify who we are and our identity, and know that we can really step up and kind of like just finish things out strong. How much do you think that mentality really is part of what even just like the Leafs would be doing in these last 3 games?
A lot. I love the fact you brought that up. I think there's a lot to that. You know, for so long we're saying, well, the Leafs aren't playing great, but they're still in first place. Well, if you look at the standings today, they're not in first place anymore. So that argument goes out the window. And sometimes objects in the rearview mirror are a lot closer than they seem. That Ottawa Senator team, they're starting to come pretty good. And so, you know, they play in Nashville tonight, then they go down to Tampa. Be careful because they're starting to surge. And I'll tell you one thing. If you finish in the 2-3 hole and it's Toronto-Ottawa, you want that 7th game at home. I don't care what anybody says. You want, and I know people say, well, we'll have more Toronto fans in Ottawa than anything else. No. So there's a lot of motivation for these next 3 games for Toronto. And I think that's something they will respond to in a good way. By the way, how was Marie-Philippe Poulin when you watched the game yesterday?
Amazing. She was the entire game. I interviewed her at the end of the game, but she had two goals. And then like at the end, she also took 5-minute major, and their penalty kill was able to kill it off. Like she did everything. And then she blocked a shot at the end of the game that like was game changer. And I talked with Pascal Daou, the general manager for New York, and he was like, what are we going to do? We're playing against Marie-Philippe Poulin. Like he wasn't even that. I mean, he was obviously upset that New York didn't win, but this was off camera. He was just like, we're going up against, you know, lightning. And they almost were able to tie it up. But watching her and getting to interview her, she also said she liked my suit, which I was like, wow, I got to write that one down because she's such an icon and such a legend.
Julie, I got to tell you, the first time I saw her play really meaningful games was 2010 at the Vancouver Olympics. I was broadcasting the game with the great Doc Emmerich, and I'm going to tell you right now, she wasn't a little bit good. She was so much better than any of the other women that I saw participating in that event that year. She basically won the gold medal game for Canada. Mark Johnson was coaching the Americans at the time, and you know he was even watching. And you know he was part of the huge Miracle on Ice in 1980, 20 years previous, or more than that, 30 years previous. And he's watching that, and I could just see his mind working like, we don't have an answer for this young lady. She's just too good. She's too good. I've never had a bad visit with her. She's one of the greatest ambassadors a sport could ever have, both on the male side and the female side. And I've never seen a female player shoot the puck like she can. Never.
Oh,
never.
gosh. Her release is
yeah, it's so good. It's
incredible.
It's so perfect. It's letter perfect. So I'm glad you had a chance to see her up close and personal, because she's really a talented person.
I missed covering her last year when Toronto faced Montreal in Pittsburgh takeover game that we got to do. But she now tied the league record in goals with 10 so far this season. And of course, there's more to be played. But when you say 2010, it's 2025. She's going off to go play with Team Canada now, like for the rivalry series. And she, will be on Team Canada for 2026, playing international hockey for 16 years.
It's amazing.
Is amazing. Yeah. I mean, Sidney Crosby too could also have that as well. But it's amazing to see also what I've liked. And just like a little aside before we go, watching, being right down on the ice level while watching the women play, and having played women's hockey, having played, like I told you, Jill Apps went to my high school, and I was on the same team with her. Yeah, I was on the same team with her, but we always said if we were on the ice together at the same time, someone messed up. Because obviously I was not supposed to be on the ice with Jill Apps. Let's just say that's a me problem. But the fact is, like, I wonder, it's so good. It's so fast. I'm a little concerned about the hitting and the physicality just a little bit, because I know some of them haven't, growing up, we didn't have contacts in hockey for women. So it's like kind of seeing some of these women get just, cross-checked, like the hits, the everything. It's just it's a little scary. That's one thing with the game. I'm curious to see how they develop with them. But in terms of the skill, the finesse, the hockey IQ, everything is lights out. It's incredible. I'd love to see them now. Like, how everyone was kind of criticizing, Haley Wickenheiser when she was playing against guys, and it was like, oh, well, she can't play with guys. It's like, well, she can, number one. But like, number two, I would also love to see, because the women's game has developed so much, women playing against guys now. Because let me tell you, there's a lot of guys that could not even hold a candle to Marie-Philippe Poulin. And that would be lovely to see. Just maybe one day we'll have that.
One never knows.
You never know. Why don't we have, we'll just do a battle of the sexes again. That would be great. You can coach the guys and I'll coach the girls.
Okay. We're good.
Pierre, you like to tell a lot of stories. So I also got to coach this celebrity hockey team once, because I'd gotten a concussion, so I couldn't play. But Dan Bylsma was there because it was at like the Staples Center, and or not the Staples Center, it was at Staples Center, and Buffalo was about to play, and he came out on the bench and he was like, "What's going on here?" And I was like, "I'm coaching these celebrities." I was like, "Get up on the bench." And he came and he like helped me coach. He was great. I love Dan Bylsma.
That's cool.
And he's done really well too. Love seeing him back in the league.
He has, considering there was a role player at Bowling Green State University for the great Jerry York, the Hockey Hall of Famer. He played on a team at Bowling Green that had a guy named Matt Ruckty, who was drafted by the New Jersey Devils, Nelson Emerson, who was drafted by the St. Louis Blues, and a guy that's a general manager of the LA Kings, Rob Blake. And Danny was on that team. I coached against them, and they were a phenomenal college team, and those were the guys who were the leaders of that team, and Danny was part of that.
Love seeing that. Have you ever thought about coming up with a game of like trivia that's like a Pierre McGuire trivia game?
No.
Has anyone ever approached you about that? Like a sports trivia, history trivia game?
No, I haven't. No, I have not been approached about that.
Okay, well, All right, I'm going to start workshopping something for you because I think we might have something that we could present to people because
I'm in. Anything you want to be part of, I'll help you, Julie. I'd always enjoy.
You know everything. You know everyone, and you have every experience, and that's why it is such a pleasure to have you here on Toronto Sports Rush. Pierre, thank you for all your insight on the Toronto Maple Leafs. As we know, they are going to be taking on Calgary on Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. That is tomorrow. And Pierre, we look forward to talking to you and seeing how they do during this stretch, as I guess our next McGuire Monday will be on the day of which everyone allegedly calls in sick the most, the day after the Super Bowl.
Thanks, Julie. I enjoyed it. Take care. Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.